Chapter 1. Mexico City, Present Day. Juan Morales led up a silent prayer in praise of whoever had invented air conditioning for automobiles. As he threaded his way through the interminable logjam of traffic that clogged the streets of Mexico City, he kept the aircon running and the windows of his Pinto firmly closed against the heat and the fumes that filled the busy streets of the great metropolis. An impatient taxi driver sounded his horn and waved an angry fist at Morales, as he attempted to change lanes a little too sharply for the other man's liking. Morales simply raised a finger and grinned in a rueful smile at the probably overworked and incredibly harassed man. He cast another glance at the street map, balanced precariously across his lap as he drove. A red X marked in red felt pen marked his destination. Not far to go. Thank God. Following the death of his brother Rodrigo, and his painful retelling of the facts of the case to the sister of one of the murdered boys back in Hidalgo del Parral, Morales had decided to take a well-earned rest, and he'd taken up a long-standing invitation from his old friend, Francisco Tamayo, a fellow police officer based in Mexico City, to visit and stay with him for a while. Morales requested and had been granted the 3 weeks' leave he had accumulated, and, after a telephone call to Tamayo, he left his home in Hidalgo del Parral and headed south for the capital. Tamayo and Morales had grown up together in the town of Parral, and both had begun their police careers in their hometown. Francisco Tamayo had been ambitious, however, and after 5 years of serving the town of his birth, he had sought the bright lights and higher profile cases of the big city. He earned himself a reputation as a dogged and intuitive investigator, and despite pressure being applied on him to accept promotion to higher office, his ambition had cooled sufficiently for him to make the decision to remain in the rank of captain of detectives, thereby allowing him to remain at the sharp end of police investigation. Tamayo would have hated a desk job. He was too good a field investigator to allow himself to stagnate in an office. In that respect, he and Morales mirrored one another. Morales, too, hated the thought of no longer being actively involved in day-to-day criminal investigations. A captain he was, and a captain he'd stay. No amount of persuading, not that anyone had ever tried, would induce him to move upstairs. The two men were much alike, and that sameness had proved to be one of the strongest bonds that cemented their friendship. Now approaching his 50th year, his hair retained its youthful, rich, dark brown coloration, though his waistline had spread a little more than he considered healthy. Morales certainly looked and indeed was fit, but he knew it wouldn't hurt to lose a few pounds. He liked to dress well, and almost always wore a clean, well-pressed suit to work. Now, though, he was on vacation, and on this very hot day, he wore a simple pair of tan slacks and a white, open-necked polo shirt. His brown eyes, normally wide open and alert, felt heavy with tiredness after the rigors of his journey. By the time he'd begun his journey to Mexico City, 3 weeks had elapsed since the funeral of Father Rodrigo. The pain of attending the funeral of his brother, and his own painful memories of all that had gone before, had taken a heavy toll on Morales, so he'd been more than glad to accept his friend's invitation. Juan Morales at last pulled his car up outside the apartment of his friend, stepped out into the heat of the day, stretched his arms skywards to relieve the stiffness of his long drive, locked the door of his rather battered old Pinto, and walked up the 5 steps that led to the cool interior of the apartment block. After a faster-than-expected ride to the 4th floor in the apartment block's surprisingly quiet and modern elevator, Morales rang the doorbell of Tamayo's apartment, and in seconds the door opened for him, to be greeted by the smiling and welcoming face of his oldest friend. "Juan, my good friend, my dearest amigo," Tamayo gushed. "It is so good to see you again. It's been far too long. How are you? How was the journey? How is everyone in Parral?" Extricating himself from the anaconda-like embrace of his friend, Morales stood back a little and laughed, perhaps for the first time since Rodrigo's funeral. Francisco Tamayo was in his mid-40s, Only